Today, we are looking at a case from the mid-20th century, so sit back as we go to Mexico. The four Gonzalez sisters were born in El Salto, in the state of Jalisco in Mexico. Their names were Delfina, Carmen, Maria de Jesus, and Luisa. They were raised by a very strict father named Isidro Torres, who was an extremely controlling man. He wouldn't let his daughters go out and would lock them up for wearing makeup. Their mother was very religious and went to church every day, and when the girls complained to her about their father, she would tell them to pray. The four sisters became accustomed to the environment in which they lived and tried to make the best of their situation. Their father was a member of the local militia, who took it upon themselves to ride horseback around the village in order to impose the rule of law onto the locals. Over time, he began to abuse his power, which resulted in him shooting a man after an argument. This meant that he would have to be very vigilant, as many of the victims' friends and relatives wanted to avenge his death. So in order to avoid any vigilante-style justice, the family quickly moved away and set up home in the small village of San Francisco del Rincon in the state of Guanajuato. San Francisco del Rincon was known locally as San Pancho. Carmen was the oldest of the sisters, and when she grew up, she started going out with an older man, and together they opened a bar. At first, the bar did okay, but never made enough money for the better lifestyle she had hoped for, and her boyfriend proved to be a poor businessman who liked to drink their profits. It didn't take long for the bar to close, but Carmen, having had a taste of independence from her dominant father, thought of other ways to generate an income. Delfina joined Carmen in business, and together they opened a bar that doubled up as a brothel. They recruited the other two sisters to help run the operation, and they soon discovered that the best way to grow the business was by bribing the local officials. Their business model seemed to work, and they opened up more of these clandestine establishments. They opened in San Francisco del Rincon, Purisma del Rincon, and León, all in the state of Guanajuato, as well as another in the city of San Juan del Rio, in the neighbouring state of Querétaro. The next expansion came when they purchased a bar in the town of San Juan de Lagos, in the state of Jalisco, from a man who was locally known as El Poquianchis. The nickname Poquianchis seemed to stay with the bar, and it was now what the sisters would be known as. They never seemed to like the name, but if it increased business, it was a minor issue. As the business grew, the sisters would need more girls to work. They had always operated a very successful recruitment campaign, and now they started to increase the numbers. Their recruitment method was simple. They would visit poor rural communities, mainly in the states of Guanajuato, Jalisco and Michoacán, where they would find the prettiest girls and offer them work as maids or waitresses. They would tell them how they had businesses in the cities of León, San Juan del Rio and Guanajuato, and that the girls could have a better life in the city, with many more opportunities than they would have if they stayed in their villages. The girls didn't need much persuading. This was the 1950s, and many of them had dreams of living and working in the city and experiencing the urban lifestyle. In some cases, the sisters would simply kidnap women with the help of ex-army captain and the sisters' security named Hermenegildo Zuniga, who was also Delfina's lover. Once the girls entered their new place of work, they would soon realise that their amazing new opportunities were actually a living nightmare. They were imprisoned and forced to sell themselves to the many visitors who frequented the bar. The prettiest girls were set aside for special customers who paid the highest prices. The sisters ran a very strict and controlled operation, very much like how they had been brought up by their father. The girls were rarely allowed outside, and they had to obey the sisters at all times. They were told what to wear and how to wear it. The girls were told what to do by the sisters, Delfina's boyfriend Zuniga, or Delfina's son, Ramon Torres, nicknamed El Tepo. They kept their workers in terrible conditions and in constant fear of abuse and torture. When they became sick or were no longer liked by customers, they would be killed, either by being locked in a room and starved to death, or sometimes they would make the other girls kill them by beating them with sticks. When a girl was killed, Zuniga and the sisters' chauffeur, named Salvador Estrada, would dispose of the bodies, which would either be burnt or buried nearby. Any girl that became pregnant would have their pregnancies terminated, and if any carried the pregnancy full term and gave birth, the baby would be taken away and killed. Any girl who didn't follow their strict rules would be made to kneel down, and a brick would be placed on each hand and one on her head, and they'd be forced to keep their hands in the air. The girls had to live on a diet of tortillas and frijoles. As the sisters seemed to be getting increasingly more powerful, they had a setback when in the late 1950s Carmen died of cancer, and Luisa left the business to seek a better life in the coastal city of Veracruz. Their setbacks continued when in 1963, Delfina's son Ramon Torres got into an argument with a police officer and was shot and killed inside the sisters' bar known as Bar El Poquianchis. The police then closed the establishment. Things now started to turn for the sisters. In the January of 1964, one of the girls who worked for the sisters, named Catalina Ortega, managed to escape from the room she was being forced to live in and found her way to the judicial police office in Leon. She was wearing dirty clothes and looked unwashed and malnourished. She told the police a dark, horrifying tale about being a captive of the Gonzalez sisters. The previous year there had been a change in the ruling authorities in Leon. The new regime were not paid by the sisters and didn't visit their establishments. The authorities were aware that villagers had reported that girls had gone missing from rural communities for years, and there were local rumours of what went on at the places ran by the sisters. On January the 14th, 1964, the police raided the sisters' bar in Loma del Angel, and they were shocked at what they found. They discovered a dozen women, all malnourished and scared, some in chains. All were in a state of despair, but their discovery was about to get even more horrifying. As police and press reporters explored the ranch, some of the girls pointed to places in the ground and told them that's where they would find the bodies. The police instructed the chauffeur to start digging, and as the hours passed, they unearthed decomposed bodies and the bones of men, women, and babies. The sisters looked on as their years of abuse were starting to unravel. They were arrested and taken to the jail at San Francisco de Rincon. On hearing the news, many local people surrounded the jail, demanding that they be allowed to exercise their own justice on the sisters. Concerned for their safety, the judge sent them to be held in the Irapuato city jail. The police searched all the premises associated with the sisters, and they found the remains of 91 different people. 1 week after the arrest, Luisa went to the police, and she too was arrested and charged with kidnapping and murder. In January 1964, she was tried, along with her sisters, Delfina and Maria de Jesus, in a trial that caused a sensation throughout Mexico. Dozens of witnesses were called, and most of them spoke about the sisters' illegal business of kidnapping, abduction, extortion, and murder. The trial was a very chaotic affair, which resulted in the sisters being found guilty of at least 91 murders, and the three were sentenced to 40 years in prison, which was the maximum sentence at the time. Delfina only spent 4 years in prison, as on the 17th of October 1968, workers doing building repair work above her cell accidentally dropped a bucket of cement on her head, which killed her. Luisa Gonzalez died alone in her cell at Irapuato jail on November the 19th, 1984. Maria de Jesus Gonzalez, the youngest of the sisters, was the only one to be freed. It is unknown why or when she was freed, but it is rumoured that she met a man in prison, and once she was released, they got married and lived their life in obscurity, finally dying of old age in the mid-1990s. In 2002, workers clearing land for a new housing development in Purisma del Rincon found remains of about 20 skeletons. authorities presume that the skeletons are from the 50s or 60s and are very likely to be victims of the Gonzalez sisters. If these latest findings can be traced back to them, it would take their number of victims to above 100. Hello everyone, and thank you so much for listening to another sad and tragic case. As per usual, please leave me any feedback or comments you may have, and I will see you in the next brief case.